At some point in your life, you have asked it. Maybe quietly in the middle of the night. Maybe out loud, in a moment of rage or grief. Maybe you asked it about yourself. Maybe you asked it watching someone you love fall apart. Why? Why does this happen? Why do good people suffer unbearable things? Why does a child get sick? Why does someone who has done everything right lose everything? Why does the universe seem completely indifferent to pain? It is the oldest question in human history. Every religion has tried to answer it. Every philosopher has wrestled with it. Every person who has ever lived has felt its weight. And most of the answers, if we are honest, don't satisfy. They comfort for a moment. And then the pain returns and the answer feels hollow. In 1864, Allan Kardec published a book that proposed something entirely different. Not a comfort, not a promise, a framework, a logical, structured explanation for why suffering exists. One that does not require blind faith, does not blame the victim, and does not reduce the universe to randomness. It is called the Gospel according to Spiritism. And the answer it offers is unlike anything you have heard before. The unanswered don't satisfy. Before we get to Kardec, we need to be honest about the answers that already exist, because they are not wrong, they are just incomplete. The most common religious answer is this: suffering is a test. God is testing your faith. Endure it with grace, and you will be rewarded in the life to come. For millions of people, this brings genuine comfort. It gives suffering a purpose, divine attention, a watching presence, a promise on the other side. But for many others, it raises a question that faith alone cannot silence. Why would a loving God design a system that requires a child to suffer in order to test the faith of a parent? Why would an omnipotent creator need to test anything at all? Why is the distribution of suffering so wildly unequal? Some people broken by loss after loss, others moving through life relatively untouched. If it is a test, it does not appear to be a fair one. The secular answer moves in the opposite direction entirely. Suffering, it says, has no meaning. It is the natural result of living in a physical world governed by cause and effect. Cells mutate. Accidents happen. People make choices that harm others. The universe is not cruel. It simply does not care. This is intellectually honest, and it is, for many people, completely unbearable, because the human mind does not accept meaninglessness well. We are meaning-making creatures. We cannot sit inside purposeless pain without something inside us beginning to break. Then there is a third answer, the one most people arrive through sheer survival instinct. Suffering makes you stronger. What doesn't kill you makes you grow. The wound becomes the gift. There is something true in this, but as an explanation for why suffering exists, it is incomplete. Because some wounds do not produce growth. Some experiences only destroy, and telling someone in acute pain that they should be grateful for what it will teach them is not wisdom. It is cruelty dressed as philosophy. Kardec's answer is none of these. It is something older, stranger, and far more precise. What science found about suffering? Before we enter Kardec's framework, there is something remarkable happening in modern psychology that prepares the ground for it. In 1946, a psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl emerged from 3 years in Nazi concentration camps, including Auschwitz, having lost almost everyone he loved. He had survived not by chance alone, but by observation. He had watched, in conditions of maximum horror, which people survived psychologically and which ones did not. And what he found was not what he expected. It was not the strongest who held together. It was not the most physically resilient. It was the ones who found meaning in the suffering, not who accepted that suffering was good, not who pretended it wasn't happening, but who were able to locate, even inside the nightmare, a reason that made endurance feel like something other and pure destruction. Frankl called this logotherapy, from the Greek logos, meaning. The idea that human beings can survive almost any. What if they have a strong enough why? He published his findings in a book called Man's Search for Meaning. It has sold over 16 million copies. It remains one of the most widely read psychological texts ever written. Frankl was not a Spiritist. He was a secular Jewish psychiatrist. But what he described, the transformative power of suffering, understood as purposeful, maps directly onto what Kardec had written 80 years before him. In 1996, psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhouns at the University of North Carolina gave this phenomenon a formal name: post-traumatic growth. After documenting hundreds of survivors of serious trauma, illness, loss, violence, disaster, they found something that contradicted the dominant clinical assumption. A significant portion of survivors did not simply recover. They grew. They reported deeper relationships, greater personal strength, new possibilities, a richer sense of spiritual meaning, and a deeper appreciation for life, all emerging directly from the experience of suffering. Not despite it, because of it. Tedeschi and Calhoun were careful scientists. They did not claim suffering was good. They did not claim everyone grows from trauma. They observed that, in a remarkable number of cases, the encounter with deep pain produced a kind of development that comfort and ease never could. This is secular science. Peer-reviewed, documented, replicated. And it is the empirical shadow of what Kardec had described in 1864 in explicitly spiritual terms. What Kardec found, the Gospel according to Spiritism, is not a conventional religious text. It takes the moral teachings attributed to Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, the parables, the blessings, and reads them through the lens of the Spiritist framework. Chapter 5 opens with a phrase that, for most of Christian history, has been interpreted as a call to passive endurance. Blessed are the afflicted. Kardec asked, what does this actually mean? Not as poetry, not as comfort for the desperate, as a philosophical claim. What would have to be true about the structure of existence for affliction to be genuinely, logically connected to something we could call blessing? And the answer the spirits gave him was not what religion had taught. Suffering, they explained, is not imposed. It is chosen. Not in this life. Not by this personality, this name, this set of memories you carry now. But by the spirit, the conscious entity that has lived before, that will live again, and that carries across lifetimes, record of what has been learned and what still needs to be confronted. Before incarnating into a physical life, the spirit, in full clarity, with the guidance of more evolved spirits, reviews what it still lacks, what qualities remain undeveloped, what debts, in the deepest moral sense, remain unresolved, what experiences it has never had, and therefore cannot yet understand. And it selects the conditions of the next life accordingly. This is not punishment. There is no judge, no sentence, no divine anger behind it. It is curriculum. The spirit that has never known loss chooses a life in which it will lose, because without having lost, it cannot develop the capacity for compassion that loss produces. The spirit that has exercised power without accountability chooses a life of vulnerability, because only from vulnerability can it understand what it inflicted on others. The spirit that has lived entirely for itself chooses a life of limitation, poverty, illness, dependence, to discover what exists beyond personal ambition. The suffering is real. The pain is genuine. The grief is not simulation, but it is purposeful at a level deeper than the personality can see from inside the experience. In question 988 of the Spirit's book, Kardec asks directly, what is the purpose of the trials that spirits impose on themselves? The answer is precise: to acquire the experience they lack, to atone for past wrongs, to elevate themselves by exercising patience, resignation, and faith. Every trial overcome is a step forward on the path of evolution, not a step forward imposed from outside, a step forward chosen from within. The mechanics of trials. This framework raises an immediate question. If the spirit chooses its trials before incarnating, why doesn't the person remember choosing them? Kardec addressed this directly. In question 393 of the Spirit's book, the answer explains that the forgetting is not an accident. It is structural. If you remembered before the test exactly what you had chosen to confront and why, the test would lose its value. You cannot develop genuine courage by facing a danger you know in advance is survivable. You cannot develop genuine compassion by suffering a loss you know you agreed to. You cannot develop genuine faith by choosing a darkness you remember will end. The not knowing is not a cruelty. It is the condition that makes the experience real. This also answers the question of inequality. Why do some people suffer so much more than others? In the Spiritist framework, no two spirits are at the same stage of evolution. Some are older in the deepest sense, not in years, but in accumulated experience across many lives. Some have already confronted what others are only now beginning to face. The person who moves through life with relative ease is not more deserving. They may simply be in a different chapter. And the person who carries suffering that seems unbearable, unearned, inexplicable, unjust, may be a very old spirit in the middle of a very advanced curriculum. This does not make the pain smaller. It makes it legible. There is a difference between pain that is meaningless and pain that is beyond our current ability to understand. One destroys, the other can be endured. In Chapter 5 of the Gospel According to Spiritism, Kardec writes something that has stayed with readers across generations. The spirit that has never suffered does not know itself. Adversity reveals what ease conceals. It is in the moment of loss, of failure, of illness, of toil, grief, when the constructed self falls away, that something deeper becomes visible. Not the personality, not the social mask, the actual quality of the consciousness underneath. And it is that consciousness, not the body, not the memory, not the name, that carries forward. W.H.Y. Tistaveri think, if any part of this framework is true, even as a working hypothesis, rather than a certainty, something fundamental shifts in how you relate to suffering. Not immediately, not in the middle of the grief. Pain does not become pleasant because it has meaning. But over time, the question changes. Instead of, why is this happening to me? The question becomes, what is this asking of me? Viktor Frankl arrived at exactly this question from completely secular direction. He wrote that the meaning of suffering is found not in the suffering itself, but in the response to it. The Spiritist framework goes one step further. It says the response is the point, not what happened, not what was done to you, what you became in the encounter with it. Because that, only that, is what the spirit carries forward. The body is left behind. The memories fade. The circumstances dissolve. But the qualities developed inside those circumstances, the patience built inside illness, the depth built inside grief, the strength built inside failure, the compassion built inside helplessness, those do not dissolve. They become part of what the spirit is, permanently, across every life that follows. This is not a small idea. It means that nothing suffered is wasted. It means that the hardest chapters of a life are not evidence of abandonment or randomness. It means that the most broken periods, the ones that made no sense while they were happening, were building something that the personality could not yet see. And it places a kind of dignity on suffering that neither religion nor science has fully managed to articulate. Not the dignity of noble endurance, not the dignity of the martyr, the dignity of a consciousness in the middle of its own deliberate evolution, choosing at a level deeper than this life can remember, to become something it could not have become any other way. Allan Kardec did not promise that suffering would end. He did not offer a paradise where the pain of this life would be forgotten or erased. He offered something harder and more enduring than that. He offered an explanation that holds together, one that does not require you to believe that God is punishing you, one that does not require you to accept that your pain is meaningless, one that does not ask you to be grateful in the middle of the grief. It only asks you to consider the possibility that you are larger than this life, that the consciousness reading these words right now has existed before in other circumstances, learning other things, that what you are going through, whatever it is not evidence that the universe has forgotten you. It may be evidence of exactly the opposite. The Gospel according to Spiritism was published in 1864. It has been read by millions of people in moments of unbearable pain, and it has given them not a way out of the suffering, but a way through it. That, perhaps, is the only thing a true answer to suffering can ever offer. Not an exit, a meaning,